Welcome to another episode of That Catholic Saint Sky. I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, and today joining me is Father David Marcham, who is Vice Postulator for the sainthood cause of Venerable Father Patrick Peyton, the Rosary priest, the family that prays together, stays together at priest, and he's got an incredible life. But to start off with, Father, tell us a little bit about yourself, just briefly, if you would, please.
Sure, Brian. It's great to be with you and your listeners, viewers. I grew up just outside of Boston in Quincy, Mass. And it's my parents and my brother and I are in my immediate family. And had a pretty regular childhood growing up in terms of school and sports. And I had a dream of being in healthcare. So I went to Northeastern and got a degree in physical therapy and practiced and got into teaching, got my master's degree in orthopedics. And lo and behold, when I started to have an interest in biomedical ethics, I started delving more into our faith. I was fortunate to be raised in a good Catholic family, and so it was an important part of my life. But the interest in the bioethics really helped to integrate my faith with my practice in physical therapy and healthcare in general. And I think that's one of the sort of the first steps in me discerning a priestly vocation. The other one that I always, point to is going to Eucharistic adoration for a holy hour every Friday evening for about a year. And in that time, I really felt the Lord was working on my heart, and then heard the gospel from Matthew, or rather from Jesus to Matthew, "Come follow me." And that took on a whole new meaning.
That is it's incredible. Yeah, you know, it's amazing what can happen when we do Eucharistic adoration. You really get a sun tan. So it sounds like you got a little exposure there to the sun's rays. And yes. That's a great thing. So tell us about this amazing priest, Father Patrick Peyton.
A lot of people know Father Peyton as the Rosary priest, or the priest that traveled the world promoting family rosary. They might know him from the saying, "The family that prays together stays together."
Prayer is the most powerful force in the whole world, and it's yours for the taking. Make it a part of your life. Give it a place in your home. Use it to strengthen your family circle. It is particularly beautiful when we use such prayers as the Family Rosary, with its meditations on the life of Christ and Mary, his blessed mother.
Some know him for the saying, "A world at prayer is a world at peace." But where it all started was over in Ireland, up in County Mayo, for anyone who's listening that's familiar with that. It's a very rural area. He was the sixth of 9 children, and his situation was not atypical. His family suffered some economic hardship, in fact, quite a bit of it. And that caused a great deal of immigration to other countries, including the United States. What also affected Father Peyton's life most at the core was the family and their faith, and how it was central to their life. No matter how bad things got, they always believed that God would take care of them. And they had a strong Marian devotion in the sense that, like many families in Ireland, they prayed the rosary every night together as a family. And yet, despite all that they had in that regard, they still had to provide materially. So Father Peyton and his brother, Tom, who would also become a priest, when Father Peyton was 18, they came to the United States to live with their sister and brother-in-law in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I bypassed an important part of the story of Father Peyton's life, which was from the time he was about 9, he wanted to become a priest. But unfortunately, for him anyway, back then they had a tremendous amount of vocational interest. And so they could be very picky about who was admitted to seminary. And as a result of Father Peyton's economic hardships, he wasn't able to complete his high school education. He basically had to work And so he was behind the 8 ball.
Okay.
He applied to the diocesan seminary and was not accepted. He applied to different religious orders, and when they heard that he hadn't even graduated from high school yet, that was that. And so at the age of 18, he felt that God was basically telling him, this is not your path, even though you felt it was. You've got to choose another path. And so he and his brother came to the US, not to become priests, but to make their way in the financial world.
Okay.
Father Peyton had an interest in real estate and thought that he could make a good living and raise a family and have a wonderful life. And I think he also said that he hoped that all the boys would become priests and the girls would become nuns. So you can see it was still in him that he so saw the value of religious life and priesthood. And I think this part of the story is really important for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
One of which is the understanding that people that we regard as holy, saintly people don't always have the simplest of lives or everything open up for them the way they'd like.
True.
And yeah, and yet what we're left with in this particular part of the story is that Father Peyton's faith is what allowed him to continue to move forward with the belief that God would work all things for the good. And he did, as we know about Father Peyton's life. So that's kind of the beginning part that I like to start with, that there were obstacles, but God was still guiding Father Peyton, and as he came to the US, and providentially, the parish he was in was where he got work as a sexton or a janitor in a parish.
He couldn't find work, isn't that correct? He had come looking for work, hoping to find work, and just couldn't find it. And this was really the only job he could find. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. So again, you can look at it two ways, that, well, he's striking out again, but God had it all worked out. That he would not be in a coal mine working or in some other industry, but that he would be in the house of the Lord, working and praying and reflecting and really getting ready for what would happen next, which was when the Congregation of Holy Cross came and did a parish mission. Okay. So they do a parish mission. The pastor there talks to them and he says, I've got two great guys here from Ireland who I think would be great candidates for your religious order. And they had a conversation and they agreed. So this is another part of the story where I see Father Peyton as a person of great humility. So now he's 19 years old. He's got to start high school at the age of 19, when most people are starting their work life. So he's in class freshman year at the age of 19, originally in Pennsylvania. And then when he joined Holy Cross, he's a sophomore, and he's 20 years old as a sophomore. And I think, boy, he had to have really trusted God. He had to have really wanted it to be sitting there with those kids, who were, age appropriate for that grade level. But I think the other part that is remarkable, I don't know how many people know this, is that once he got on track, when he got to the undergraduate program at Notre Dame with the seminary, he became one of the top students. And then the same in the theologian. Wow. He was the one that if the professor couldn't be there, he asked Pat Peyton, the seminarian, to teach the class.
It's amazing.
And yeah, so you got this guy over in Ireland who leaves when he's, probably in about, 8th grade, comes to the US at the age of 18 rather, picks up high school, and then graduates from high school at the age of 23. And
it reminds me, shameless plug alert. I did this book, 150 North American Martyrs You Should Know.
Yep.
And one of the priests that I talk about in there, Father Sandy Cairns, a Maryknoll missioner, was in the same sort of situation. He dropped out of high school and had to complete high school at an advanced age, like Father Peyton.
Yep.
But the thing that kind of makes me tickle or giggle rather is how at some point you have to wonder those people who rejected Father for the seminary back in Ireland later saw what he had become and then, oh, kind of like the people at Decca Records, you know, they rejected the Beatles and regretted it everlasting in an everlasting way. So in any event, he's this brilliant student. He's on fire with the faith. He gets ordained.
There's another obstacle he has to pass.
Okay.
So he's cruising along. And by now, in my mind, if I could think like he's thinking, he's probably thinking, Lord and our Blessed Mother, you have taken care of me. You brought me through the worst. And now I am going to be a missionary for you anywhere in the world you want to send me. That was his desire to be a missionary. So, but towards the end of his theological studies in seminary, he contracts tuberculosis, but he doesn't know it at first. And of course, you know, he doesn't want to mess up what is going along so well by going to the faculty and saying, you know, fathers, I'm not feeling so well. You know, he and a lot of people back then, if you were thought to be not in strong health, they would say to you, I'm sorry, we cannot have you in the order because you will not be able to serve.
Right.
And so you've got to imagine that somewhere in the back of his mind, he was thinking, you know what, I'm going to ride this out. I'll be okay. But he wasn't. And he gets progressively worse and worse and worse. And to the point that he finds himself in an infirmary bed at the University of Notre Dame. And the doctors say to him, you got two choices. You can have this radical surgery, which we don't know if you're going to really survive from or benefit from in the long run, or you can just see how things play out, but we don't think you're going to live.
Ooh, bad choice.
So there he is. He's a catch-22. Of course, he becomes, you know, despondent. And lo and behold, God sends the right person to him. His professor, Cornelius Hegarty, a Holy Cross professor, comes to him and he says, Pat, you've got your faith. Your parents taught you, you know what to do. And he said, you know, if you believe in Mary 50%, that's how much she'll be there for you. If you believe in her 100%, she'll be there 100% for you. So he totally surrendered in that moment, placed his whole faith in the Blessed Mother to intercede for him to be healed. And amazingly, he was. In fact, he said he could feel a physical and a spiritual change that took place. And so he senses this, and the next challenge he had was to convince the doctors to rerun the x-rays on his lungs. They did after some convincing. He was always good at convincing people. After some convincing, it shows he's healed. Now, this is what would be the question that would lead him for the rest of his life in his mission. So now he says, okay, I've been given a second chance. How do I repay this debt? And so he thought and prayed about it. And eventually, that is what would lead him to do the worldwide Rosary Rally crusades, the radio, the television, and the movies, all in an effort. His initial goal, we finally came to it, first of all, was to get 10 million US families to pray the Rosary.
Wow.
That was his goal, his life ministry goal. Now, he far exceeded that. You know, that's the story of his life. He far exceeded what anyone thought he could do. But it was through that life and death crisis where a priest reminded him of the gift of faith from his parents that he put into action. He received the gift of healing. And then, throughout the rest of his life, wanted to repay the Blessed Mother, our Lord, through what he gave back.
Remarkable. And so then what happens after he's healed? He gets to go back to school.
He's ordained with his brother.
Ordained with his brother. Great thing to have happen.
Absolutely. And you can only imagine the grace and the joy that they must have felt. And yet, here's how, this is a little lesson, I think, for any of us who feel that maybe people don't see what we can live up to. The priests who were in charge, the superiors, and I think rightly so, said, you know, Pat, we're so glad that you've survived and you're a priest, but you can't be a missionary. You don't have the health for it. And so, you know, at this point, I think he's probably thinking in his mind, I'll be obedient, but God will open another door.
Okay.
So they assigned him to go to Albany, New York, to be a chaplain for the Vincentian Institute,
Okay.
and in particular to the brothers who were there.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes there, all with the idea, like they wanted to kind of keep him, you know, low level activity so that he didn't have a relapse and, you know, succumb to tuberculosis or something else. So he gets there, and lo and behold, within a year, he founds Family Rosary, which I think back to my first year of priesthood. I wasn't founding anything. I was just trying to make sure I knew where the keys to the different doors were to open the church. So he starts putting a plan into action, which, as I alluded to, was to get families to pray the Rosary in a great number across the U.S. And so he starts to partner with St. Rose, and which was a high school, rather college, and the Vincentian Institute, which was a high school. And he engages people with this great idea about, we've got to get people praying the Rosary. He gets on the local radio station, and he's, you know, doing meditations on the Rosary and leading people in the Rosary. And then he starts to write bishops, and eventually he has one of his big breaks. He's able to get a radio program, a national radio program on Mother's Day in 1945. And in it, he gets President Truman, he gets Bing Crosby, he gets the parents of the Sullivan brothers who died at war. And it's a breakthrough because he's able to share his message of the importance of family rosary prayer and families praying together with a national audience. And at that point, he says, I want to do this all the time. And so they say to him, well, what you really need to do, it's okay, you know, to call up Bing Crosby from New York and somehow get him to be on your program, but you've got to go to Hollywood.
Following the success of the first radio show on Mother's Day 1945, Father Peyton attempted other programs with different broadcasters in New York. It soon became clear that he would need to go to Los Angeles. Arriving in Los Angeles, he went directly to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles Cathedral, St. Vibiana. He paused to pray as he waited to see Bishop Cantwell. While he prayed, Monsignor John Colley came over and asked if he needed anything. It turned out that Colley was from the same region of Ireland as Peyton. The two struck up an instant friendship. With Colley's help, Father Peyton secured support from then Archbishop Cantwell. Monsignor Colley also sent Peyton to some of the local parishes to meet pastors who could introduce him to actors and entertainment industry professionals. At Good Shepherd Parish in Beverly Hills, he met Irene Dunn, Ethel Barrymore, Charles Boyer, Maureen O'Hara, and they all pledged to help with Father Peyton's proposed radio program.
And so he then goes to Hollywood, meets many of the stars, again, providentially, and is able to convince them, Brian, able to convince these stars to work with him. A guy they've never met before, a guy who's not even going to pay him, to get them to work with him on what would become Family Theater of the Air. And a lot of people grew up in the previous generation listening to Family Theater of the Air with the big stars like Jimmy Stewart and all these people who would do these dramas, which, you know, really anyone could appreciate. You didn't have to be a Catholic, but they all had an important, you know, moral and virtuous message that would be uplifting.
They're amazing. When I lived in Sacramento and we had the great Catholic radio station out there, I got to listen to those every Saturday morning.
Oh, yeah.
And it was fantastic. What you see pictures of him posing with Jack Benny, Lucille Ball. You mentioned President Truman.
Yep.
These weren't Catholic people. In fact, I have read some comments by President Truman where he had some of the native, I wouldn't say so much anti-Catholicism, but certainly skepticism and kind of latent low-grade bigotry, let's say,
Sure.
of so many Americans at that time. And yet he was able, this man, Father Peyton, was able to get them to go along with this program. How did that happen?
I think what was clear with anyone who met him, they were taken by a couple of things about him. Number one, he was real. He wasn't acting. He wasn't trying to further his own cause, but he was trying to do something good for mankind. And that in the circles that we're talking about, whether they be political circles, financial circles, media circles, there's a lot of people with, trying to work their way up the ladder, hidden agendas. It's all about what they can get. And with Father Peyton, it was all about serving our Blessed Mother and our Lord in a way that would help all people. And unfortunately, I never got to meet him personally, but I have talked to many people who have, and I've also seen many videos of him. And what comes through is that when he was talking to you, you had a sense that this was a holy, humble man. And I like to think that what would have happened there was in a world of, kind of dog eat dog. When you put someone into that world, mm-hmm. you're captivated. You're in a sense, you're lifted up into something greater than the whole power struggle that goes on in everyday life. And I think that his combination of holiness, humility, certainty, he had a lot of certainty about our Blessed Mother and what she wanted him to do, and the value made it so compelling that, and the other part that inspires me as a priest was he had a real fervor, a real zeal for his mission. And I think that was something that people were drawn into. And even if they weren't Catholic, they thought, wouldn't this be great to be part of this? And I think that that whole mix with God's grace really got a lot of people who might have been closed-minded or had some kind of prejudice to leave that to the side and say, you know what? For some reason, I'm going to say yes to this Irish priest who doesn't really know anything about this world that I live in, but that is doing something good. And I think about, how do we do that? That's one of the things I think about. How do we, as people, in our case as Catholics, how do we take that mix of virtue and faith and apply it to our lives?
It strikes me that he is so much like Pope St. John Paul II in this respect, because Pope John Paul never had any fear. And the reason is that he was so convinced of the salvific message, the economy of salvation won for us, the salvation won for us by Jesus Christ through his Blessed Mother, that we come to him through her most assuredly. And the conviction that flowed from that, the confidence that flowed from that, enabled him to meet any obstacle without fear. And it was attractive. You read of, say, Bob Dylan or Bono of the band U2, after their experiences with meeting the Holy Father. And it's the same sort of thing that you describe. And you mentioned, how do I get that into my priestly life? I'm wondering, how do I get that into my life as a layman? Because that confidence can, it seems if we each had that, we could just bowl over the sort of obstacles that we sometimes find in our way and really win so many souls for Christ and do so much good for our world as a result.
And I think, in a more broader view of what we're talking about,
Hmm.
This is the importance of us getting to know these holy people like St. John Paul II, like Venerable Patrick Peyton,
Yes.
is when we get to know them and their particular stories, it's inspirational to us.
Absolutely.
That we can in our own way appropriate what they came to. And, you know, as I said before, in the beginning when we were talking, I'm telling you all the obstacles that he faced. Well, everyone didn't say yes to him, and everything didn't always go according to plan.
Right.
But another trait that I, in my ministry and my own just personal life that I try to keep in mind is that he persevered. Whenever there was a setback, he didn't give up. He didn't become bitter. He just picked himself up, went back to the Blessed Mother and to Jesus and said, okay, what next? And then he did his part. And I think that's another lesson that we can take from Father Peyton's life. We're all going to face adversity. We're all going to have fears. We're all at times going to be told no. But what Father Peyton did was he continued on. He just says, okay, Lord, now what next?
It's amazing. He reminds me a lot of a Canadian mystic, Blessed Dina Bélanger, Blessed Cecilia Bélanger, from her religious name. Just whatever happened, okay, it's God's will. What do you want from me next? And that's just amazing. Father, we have to leave it there for the time being because you have priestly duties to get to, and that's awesome. But I need to have you come back because we haven't even touched on the Rosary crusades, which drew millions and millions of people over the course of the decades that he conducted these. So thank you so much for being with me. And thank you for joining us this afternoon here on That Catholic Saints Guy. Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of this program on Venerable Father Patrick Peyton of the Holy Cross Fathers. And in the meantime, may God bless you. Be sure to click that little subscribe button down there. Click the thumbs up. Those are always helpful. And be sure to share. And if you have any comments, by all means, put those in the comment box. I'll be sure to get to those as soon as I possibly can. Thank you, and God bless you.